The bill arrived at our house before I knew my wife had bought a pink Steinway piano. My son's little face was flushed with excitement. We waited from sunrise to sunset until the frosting on the cake had collapsed. My son pressed his lips together, sat back down at our old grand piano, and played Happy Birthday for himself. At almost the same moment, I saw Richard's post on his social feed. Happy Children's Day. Thanks to Laura for the awesome new toy for my son. Can we be a little more low-key next time? Now the whole neighborhood knows we got a Steinway delivered. I stared at the post, my fingers gripping my phone so hard they turned white. I didn't even notice my son had walked up behind me. Dad, is that Mr. Lee? I snapped back to reality, instinctively turning off the screen. But the bitter look on my son's face told me he'd seen everything. Just then, the front door swung open. Laura walked in, looking rushed. The smile hadn't quite left her face yet as she feigned annoyance. Did the birthday party start already? Why didn't you wait for Mom? Well, no birthday present for you, then. My son, who had been staring at the floor, suddenly looked up, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. I found myself looking at Laura, too, a small part of me hoping maybe Laura bought 2 pianos. One for Richard's son as a Children's Day gift, and one for our son for his birthday. But in the next moment, my son and I were both let down. Laura pulled out a custom-made children's watch with a spaceship design on the face. Dino, what do you think? Do you like it? My son forced a smile, took the watch, placed it on the sofa, and mumbled a dry thank you. Laura turned to me, clearly displeased. What's with him? I rushed to pick up this watch after working late, then hurried back to celebrate with him. Why the long face? My son's voice trembled. You promised you'd get me a piano. Laura unbuttoned her coat, growing impatient. Just because you didn't like your birthday present? We're spoiling you rotten. All right, it's not like we can't afford a piano. I'll have your dad take you to buy one tomorrow. Okay? No, that wasn't it. My son wasn't throwing a tantrum. He just wanted a piano for his birthday, from his mother. And this one little thing, Laura had pushed off year after year, always forgetting. If she were just busy, I could let it go. But she somehow remembered to buy a gift for Richard's son. Yet she forgot the promise she made to her own. I couldn't take it anymore. I tossed my phone in front of her. Working late, helping Richard deliver a Steinway? Her clumsy lie was exposed, but she didn't show a shred of panic. She adjusted her glasses and spoke with a hint of exhaustion. Daniel, not this again. I told you, Richard and I don't have that kind of relationship. I don't owe him my heart. I owe him my life. Laura had been saying the same thing for years. I'm just paying a debt. Don't overthink it. I'm just making up for the motherly love his son is missing. When pressed, she would add, if I hadn't insisted on marrying you and breaking our engagement back then, he wouldn't have ended up where he is today. What more do you want? Laura and Richard were childhood sweethearts, engaged since they were young. They were on the verge of getting married. But then, at a concert, Laura met me. At the time, I was on a stage in London playing Liszt's Reminiscences of Norma. It was love at first sight for Laura, and she pursued me relentlessly. She even broke off her engagement. As fate would have it, disaster struck the Lee family. After Richard's engagement was called off, his family's company ran into serious trouble and was on the brink of bankruptcy. Richard hastily got back together with his ex-girlfriend, Sheila, and they married. A few years into the marriage, Sheila was killed in a car accident while signing a contract in Dallas on Laura's behalf, leaving Richard alone with their young son, Zach. There was no inheritance, it had all been picked clean. From that point on, Laura's guilt reached its peak. For a while, she could barely bring herself to see Richard. She'd lock herself in the study, repeating over and over, "It's my fault. It's all my fault. I was the one who pulled her out of that darkness." But right now, I was starting to think it would have been better to let her rot in it. Because after that, Laura began trying to make it up to Richard and his son, until she crossed a line. And the one crossing, it didn't seem to care at all. Just like now, she still thought this whole thing was just me being jealous. She threw out a "don't drag the kids into adult matters" and went back to the study alone. In the past, For the sake of a healthy home environment for our son, I would have been the one to go and smooth things over. But today I had no desire to get up. I just motioned to my downcast son. Dino, you haven't opened Dad's present yet. The moment he opened it, a gasp of amazement escaped his lips. He was instantly happy, bouncing over to me and asking cautiously, Dad, is this real? In his hands were a few old, worn sheets of paper. The musical staff was messy, covered in smudges and crossed-out notes. But my son's hands were trembling with excitement. I raised an eyebrow. Of course, the real deal, an original Chopin manuscript. I had paid a fortune for it and called in a lot of favors. But seeing the smile on my son's face, I knew it was all worth it. I sat with my son at the piano, and we played a nocturne together. At some point, Laura came out of the study. She watched us, lost in thought, as we enjoyed the moment together. After a while, her tone softened, and she spoke first. "Okay, Mom was wrong. How about I go with you tomorrow to pick out a piano?" Unfortunately, the next day, she broke her promise again. Just as the sky was beginning to lighten, Laura left in a hurry. Richard said his son ran away. She explained on her way out. "I'm going to help him look. We'll go pick out the piano when I get back." Before the last word was out, she had vanished through the door. My nails dug deep into my palms. I hated how she broke her promises to our son again and again. At the breakfast table, Dino, surprisingly, didn't ask where Laura was. He just ate his breakfast with perfect manners, then looked up. "Dad, can you take me to pick out a piano?" Dino and I went to the piano store. The manager knew my habits and discreetly stepped aside, only approaching when I needed something. My son tried out one piano after another. I strolled leisurely around the store. In a corner, I saw a little boy timidly touching a piano. When he saw me approach, he thought I wanted to try it and shyly moved away. I smiled. "It's okay. I'm not trying this one. Go ahead." The boy's clothes weren't cheap, but strangely, there were no parents with him. I couldn't help but ask, "Hey there, are you here buying a piano by yourself? Where are your parents?" He jumped, startled, and spoke in a tiny voice. "I'm not buying, just looking. We have a piano at home." Then, as if to build up his own confidence, he boasted, "It's a Steinway." I couldn't help but smile. When I got my first Steinway, I was even more of a show-off than him, wanting the whole world to know. Seeing a Steinway right there, my interest was piqued. "Well then, may I have the honor of hearing a little musician play a piece for me?" The boy hesitated for a moment, wiped his hands on his clothes, and sat down at the piano. Fluent notes leaped from his fingertips. I watched the boy's fingers, a barely perceptible frown creasing my brow. When the piece ended, he bit his lip and looked at me. How was it?" I clapped with a smile. "Excellent." The boy seemed happy but also a little disappointed. "But my dad says I don't play well, and I don't really like the feel of a Steinway." It's too. Almost at the same time, the boy and I said in unison, "Too light." The boy's eyes lit up. "Mister, you think so too?" I had actually noticed it earlier. The boy was small and had small hands, so he didn't have enough control over the keys. And Steinway keys are very light, the kind that make a sound with the slightest touch, making it easy for fingers to slip. I explained it to him gently and then pointed to a piano nearby. "You'd actually be a great fit for a Bosendorfer. Its keys have more weight, which would suit you well." He curiously went over to try it. "Wow, you're right. Mister, you know so much." I offered some sincere advice. "You should talk to your parents about it. Piano isn't better just because it's more expensive. You have to choose one that's right for you." The boy reluctantly caressed the Bosendorfer. "My dad won't let me switch. He just loves Steinways." It wasn't my place to comment on another family's business. When I turned around, I saw my son staring at me thoughtfully, having apparently overheard our conversation. I walked over to him. "Did you pick one?" My son looked at the Steinway on his left, then at a more understated piano on his right. Finally, he made his decision. "Yeah, I've decided." My son chose a Fazioli, an Italian piano not as famous as a Steinway but renowned for its brilliant sound. I paid for it without hesitation. 250,000. But I didn't feel a pang of regret. I was just happy he chose the piano that was better for him. On the way home, just as we reached the entrance to our gated community, I spotted Richard. I didn't really have any dealings with him, but ever since he insisted on friending me, he'd been posting pictures of himself on his feed every few days. It was hard not to recognize him. I didn't want to deal with him and was about to take a detour home. But just then, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Laura. "Did you buy the piano?" Dino wasn't crying, was he? "The bill's on me. You have received a transfer of 200,000. Without a second thought, I hit return. Laura probably didn't look closely and assumed I'd accepted it. So she thought my anger had subsided. She sent a playful message. "You can't be mad anymore now that you've taken the money." I didn't want to engage and was about to lock my screen. Then another message from Laura came through. "Oh, by the way, I need to tell you something. This morning, Richard said his son was practicing piano at home and someone complained about the noise. His son got upset and ran away. I figured we have so many empty houses, so I let them stay in the community for now. At least that way no one will complain." My mind went blank. Across the way, Richard raised his eyebrows and waved at me. A sickening realization hit me, and my hands started to shake with rage. "You let them stay in the house I bought for Dino to live in when he gets married?" Laura replied instantly. "Oh, come on, Dino's just a kid. That's ages away. We can just have them move out later." I was too furious to speak. When I bought our villa, I had also bought the crown jewel of the community next door. I wanted it to be a home for my son when he got married, so he wouldn't be too far from me after starting his own family. I'd had it maintained for years, picking out every brick and tile myself. The renovation costs alone had reached an astonishing figure. And now Laura had lent it to Richard without a second thought. I replied to Laura, "Get back here, now. Or you can take Richard and get lost on the other side of the planet." I used every ounce of willpower to keep a straight face and told my son to go home first. But when Dino saw the moving company hauling that pink Steinway into the villa, he understood everything. For the first time in his life, he disobeyed me. "Dad, I'll stay with you." Before I could say anything, Richard was standing in front of me. He looked at my trembling fingers and smirked. "Daniel, are you really this angry? It's just a house and a piano. It's not like I'm taking your woman." Before he could finish, I slapped him across the face, clean and hard. He seemed shocked that I would actually hit him in public. The movers and nosy neighbors all turned to stare. Embarrassed, Richard was about to hit back, but his eyes suddenly caught something over my shoulder. He changed his mind in a split second, clutching his cheek as his eyes welled up. I had no patience for his melodrama, but someone else did. Laura rushed past me like a gust of wind, steadied Richard, and yelled at me, "Daniel, are you crazy?" I nodded thoughtfully, then swung my arm around and gave Laura a slap too. "Didn't want you to feel left out, did we? I've never seen someone cheat on their husband and use their son's future home to house their boy toy. Guess you haven't been hit enough." My voice was loud, and everyone present heard it clearly. Instantly, 100 complicated looks fell on the two of them. Laura, who cared deeply about her image, couldn't be bothered with anything else. She hissed through her teeth, "Daniel, let's talk inside." I was actually curious to see what they had done to my son's house. A 200,000 piano, I didn't care. A gift is a gift, like tossing a treat to a puppy. But a 30 million house, whoever dared to live in it, I'd destroy them. Laura dispersed the crowd of onlookers. The four of us walked into the villa. As soon as we entered, we saw a small boy peeking around the doorway. I froze. It was the boy from the piano store this morning. What a coincidence. The last time I saw Richard's son was at his mother's funeral. He was just a little kid then, and since that day, Richard had never posted a single picture of his son. Even on posts about his son, he would only post pictures of himself. Richard motioned to the boy. "Zach, come here. Your Aunt Laura is here again." He deliberately emphasized the word again, as if to prove a point. I'm no saint. I couldn't just feel nothing toward Richard's son. Remembering our pleasant chat that morning, I couldn't stop a bit of venom from seeping into my voice. What a damn shame. The boy, who had been watching me cautiously with a hopeful smile, turned pale. Tears welled up in his eyes, threatening to fall. Laura frowned at me. Daniel, where are your manners? Richard seemed determined to play the opposite role. If I was petty, he would be magnanimous. Well, now this must be your son, Dino, right? First time visiting Uncle's house. Make yourselves at home. Tell the housekeeper what you want to eat. Great. He really knew how to dance on my last nerve. So I didn't hold back. Your house? Great. I'll sell it to you for 30 million. Cash or wire transfer. Laura, seeing I was on the verge of exploding, tried to smooth things over. Dino, take your little brother upstairs to play. The adults need to talk. My son didn't move. He looked at me, and only when I nodded did he get up and head upstairs. Zach followed behind him like a timid little shadow. Once the boys were gone, Laura looked at me with disapproval. Our son is here, so I'm giving you some face and not calling you out. But look at you today, you're acting like a madman. So what if they're just borrowing it for a few years? Then, as if worried she'd been too harsh, she added playfully, I'm all yours, so what is there to worry about? I let out a cold laugh. Don't bother. You only give me the things that aren't worth anything. Laura didn't want Richard to see her red-faced and flustered. Richard tactfully got up, saying he was going to check on the kids, leaving Laura and me to stare each other down. There was nothing left to say. The conversation quickly went cold. Just as I was losing patience and about to call the police to have Richard forcibly removed, his housekeeper ran over, looking panicked. Mr. Lee, that pink piano has several huge scratches on it. Soon, our son and Zach were called down to the living room. Richard, his meaning clear, complained pointedly, Laura, I told you that you need to treat them both equally. What kind of mother are you? Your own son doesn't even have a Steinway yet, but you went and bought one for Zach first. See? Little kids have feelings too. His words all but declared that my son had destroyed the piano out of jealousy. I stared at him coldly. Say one more word, and I will personally track down every last cent Laura has ever spent on you. Richard opened his mouth, as if to retort, but Laura cut him off impatiently. That's enough. Both of you just stop. Richard's eyes immediately turned red. But this time, Laura didn't rush to comfort him as she usually would. Instead, she looked sternly at our son. Dino, were you being naughty just now? Just admit you were wrong and it'll be fine. Dad, Mom, and Uncle Richard won't be mad at you. Before she finished, our son's eyes widened in disbelief. His lips trembled. Mom, you don't believe me either? Laura tried to coax him. What has Mom taught you? A good boy is one who can admit his mistakes and correct them. Tears streamed down our son's face. I couldn't take it anymore. All this time, I thought Laura was, at worst, just a little too nice to everyone, spreading her warmth around. Now I knew her warmth was only ever for outsiders. I pulled my son behind me. Enough. You're so full of crap. We're getting a divorce, Laura. At those words, everyone in the room reacted differently. My son's eyes widened as he looked at me, but he didn't object. Richard had a look of unconcealed glee on his face. Laura just stared at me, stunned. Took her a moment to find her voice. Daniel, I wasn't saying it was your failure as a parent. It doesn't have to come to this. I cut her off. You're right. My parenting isn't a failure. My marriage is. My words hit a nerve, and Laura looked embarrassed. Since she didn't dare yell at me, she turned to our son, her voice sharp. Look at what a mess you've made over this little thing. Tell your father to stop this nonsense right now. My son's voice trembled, but it was firm. My dad isn't making a fuss, and this isn't a little thing. I didn't do it. You can't frame me. He pointed at Zach. I was with him the whole time. He can vouch for me. All eyes in the room turned to Zach. I couldn't help but sigh internally. Richard took a few steps forward and pushed Zach into the middle of the room. Well, what did you see? Zach recoiled, trying desperately to back away, but Richard's fingers dug into his shoulder, refusing to let go. Zach looked from one person to another. After a long moment, he lowered his eyes. I don't know. I went to the bathroom for a minute. I didn't see what happened. Richard was clearly not satisfied with that answer. Our son stared at Zach in disbelief. You're lying. You were right behind me the whole time. I patted my son's shoulder reassuringly, signaling him to stop. Laura looked at me as if she had one. I say we just drop it. Come on, you two boys shake hands and this will all be over. I let out a cold laugh. Laura, I think you're mistaken. Do you really think I care about the truth? You bought that piano with marital assets, and this villa is in my name. Even if Dino did do it, what right do they have to demand a handshake and reconciliation from my son? Before I finished, my assistant walked in. Mr. Quinn. The moment it happened, I had called her and asked her to bring people over. Now, I gestured upstairs with my chin. Get that pink Steinway out of here, sell it, and donate the money to charity. Richard shrieked and lunged forward to stop them, but he was shoved aside. He could only shake Laura frantically. Laura, look at him. In the end, it's all about the money for him. But for once, Laura didn't side with him. Instead, she rubbed her temples tiredly. Daniel, let's talk. The atmosphere on the way home was heavy. Laura was the first to break the silence. She beckoned to our son gently. Dino, come here. My son instinctively looked at me. I neither nodded nor shook my head, leaving the decision to him. He hesitated, then walked over, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Laura stroked his hair and said, surprisingly, you've been wronged, haven't you? Laura then tried to reason with our son in a tone of weary resignation. She said she knew he was innocent. She knew he'd grown up watching me, and we both had a natural respect for pianos, treating them as our partners. She knew he would never destroy any piano. Dino was confused. Then why did you? Laura sighed. We're family. Family can take a small loss and we can talk it out later at home. Your Uncle Richard is different. He's already had a hard life. And little Zach, think about it, he grew up without a mother. Isn't that pitiful? I almost laughed out loud. Such a perfectly twisted logic. My son was dumbfounded. He managed to whisper, I think having a mother is pretty pitiful for me, too. After educating our son, Laura turned to educate me. You're angry right now, so I won't argue with you. But this is the one and only time. Don't you ever threaten me with divorce again, no matter how angry you get. That's a bottom line. I sneered. Which one of your eyes told you I was threatening you? Do you want your legal team to draft the divorce papers, or should mine? Laura froze, studying my expression. You're serious? I don't agree. She pushed our son forward. Go on, talk some sense into your father. My son subtly sidestepped her hand and said nothing. Laura kept talking at him. Your dad is just a retired pianist. If we really get divorced, do you think he can maintain the comfortable life you have now? Just then, the piano my son had picked out that morning was delivered. Laura glanced at it and froze. That's not a Steinway? Then, as if a light bulb went off, she looked at me. You bought some off-brand piano and still accepted my $200,000 transfer? Daniel, if you need money, you can just ask me. You don't have to scheme and scrape money from me like this. Laura didn't recognize a Fazioli. She thought any piano that wasn't a Steinway was junk. I couldn't listen anymore. Why don't you take a good look at your transaction history? Are your eyes just for decoration? After being slapped and yelled at by me all day, Laura finally snapped. Daniel, I've been spoiling you rotten. You think about it. What good will a divorce do you? I have a company, I have stocks, I can keep making money. And I have Richard, who is completely devoted to me. What do you have? A savings account that you'll just burn through? Laura stormed out on the spot and went to stay over at Richard's place. And from that day on, I seemed to calm down. I didn't mention the divorce again, nor did I bring up making Richard move out of the villa. Laura thought I had surrendered and became even more convinced that I only responded to a firm hand. She wanted to use the opportunity to knock some sense into me, so she had her secretary deliver a divorce agreement. She paraded around with Richard and Zach. She even flaunted it in front of me. Daniel, Zach is looking for a piano teacher. I think you'd be perfect. You have to teach Dino anyway. Might as well teach them together. She expected me to cry, to throw a fit, to feel humiliated. But I just kept tuning the piano without looking up and casually replied, Sure. Laura was stunned. She asked tentatively, "You're really willing?" I smiled. See how messed up this woman is? Go against her and she feels her authority is challenged. Go along with her and she feels uneasy all over. Richard demanded I give the lessons at his house. The location was the villa I had bought for my son. I readily agreed. The moment I walked in, Richard handed me a pathetically thin envelope. "Mr. Quinn, Zach's piano lesson fee." I walked past him without a glance, stood in front of Laura, and threw a stack of documents in her face. The sharp edge of the paper cut her pretty face. But Laura didn't seem to feel the pain. She stared at the papers that had landed on her lap and frowned. "A divorce agreement? Daniel, not this again. I'm not signing it. As for the lessons, if you really don't want to do it, then forget it." I laughed coldly. "I suggest you sign this one. The other version doesn't have such a favorable asset split." Laura looked up, confused. My assistant stepped forward and handed her a thick stack of files. Laura took one look and her pupils shrank. "Daniel, you've gone too far." I shot back, "We're just getting even." During the time Laura was trying to teach me a lesson, she and Richard had gotten too close. So close that a private investigator took a lot of photos. Laura and Richard holding Zach's hands on either side. Richard cooking for Laura, cutting his hand by accident, and Laura tending to it with concern. Of course, much of this couldn't be submitted as legal evidence. But it didn't matter. I would post it online and use public opinion to pressure her. But the most powerful evidence I had was sent to me by Richard himself. It was a photo of Laura lying next to him in bed. The suggestive red marks on her neck, Richard's triumphant confession, that was the kind of evidence the court would accept. I spoke at the right moment. You have two choices. We split the assets and have a peaceful divorce. Or I prove adultery in court and you walk away with nothing. Laura, which one will you sign? Laura must have gone deaf. She just stared blankly at the photos. Finally, she spoke. "Daniel, all this time you've been plotting against me?" I laughed, exhilarated. "What do you think?" Things went smoothly after that. Laura had to sign whether she wanted to or not. My assistant later asked me privately why I didn't just make her leave with nothing. I sipped my coffee while basking in the sun. First, when the money in your account reaches a certain point, it really is just a number. There's no need to waste energy fighting with her over a string of digits. Second, never back someone completely into a corner. If I had really forced her out with nothing, Laura wouldn't have let me live in peace either. This is the best outcome. We both cut our losses and draw a clean line. Keeps my mind clear and my blood pressure down. My assistant had a lesson-learned expression and went back to handling the details. Meanwhile, my son practiced the piano as if he hadn't heard a thing. When I told him about my decision to divorce, he just said calmly, "I know." He didn't have much of a reaction. Now, I tried to talk to him. "Even though we're divorced, I've already agreed that she can visit you anytime. As long as you're okay with it." My son played the final note and answered with a question of his own. "Dad, why did you get a divorce?" I thought for a moment. Too many disappointments, I guess. My son smiled. "Me too." The day we signed the divorce papers, Richard was there. He was playing the part of the supportive spouse. He kept asking me how I was entitled to so much money. I found it amusing, because it was all my premarital property. As for the house I originally bought for my son, I found it tainted. I made Laura buy me out in cash. Laura couldn't come up with that much money at once and wanted to use company stock to cover it. I politely declined. Laura was incredulous. "This is worth much more than cash." I replied with a knowing look. "Not necessarily. I'm the kind of person who prefers cash in hand." Laura had no choice but to scrape the money together. She looked utterly defeated, but Richard was beaming. "Laura, this is for the best. It saves you from getting tangled up with him in the future." I don't know if it was my imagination, but Laura's face seemed to darken even more after he said that. The day we moved out of the villa, my son was in the passenger seat. "Dad, Zach is behind us." I glanced in the rearview mirror. The boy was jogging behind the car, waving at us, looking like he wanted to say something. I paused for a second, then hit the gas and sped away. The boy finally stopped chasing, standing there with his head down, looking dejected. My son wanted to say something but didn't. I kept my eyes on the road. You think I'm cruel? My son shook his head. I think he's pitiful. There are many pitiful people in the world. But if feeling sorry for someone else makes me feel bad, I'd rather be the villain. Life after the divorce was incredibly busy. My son went to a boarding school. I was busy starting a film and television music production company, specializing in movie scores. I'd been interested in this field for a long time, but I was always too busy helping Laura's company with business development to pursue it. Now, my dream was finally coming true. It wasn't easy at first. It was a new venture, after all. But after 3 months of nonstop work, I finally got the hang of it. As it happened, the owner of a partner company invited me to a charity dinner. I agreed, thinking it would be a good opportunity to expand my network. But as soon as I arrived at the ballroom, I ran into Laura and Richard. Laura looked surprised. Daniel, do you need something from me? This isn't the right time. I'll contact you tomorrow. Her words left me speechless. I'd heard that Laura had been busy patching up financial holes in her company. Richard, meanwhile, had gotten his wish and finally married Laura. At that moment, Richard put his arm around Laura's, as if to claim ownership. Daniel, you need to remember your place. In that instant, I had an epiphany. The two of them were a match made in hell. Before I could say anything, someone came up from behind Laura. Professor Quinn, over here. Your seat is at the main table. I'll show you the way. I nodded elegantly. Thank you. Laura looked toward the voice and froze. Mr. Wallace? This is Laura Quinn. I don't know if you remember me, but we worked together for 5 years. I heard you weren't renewing our contract this year. I was wondering if there was some misunderstanding? If it's a matter of price, I can… Mr. Wallace cut her off. I heard you and Professor Quinn got divorced? Laura nodded instinctively. Mr. Wallace looked confused. Well, there you have it. Laura was about to lose her mind. She didn't understand at all. She looked completely bewildered. So, what does my divorce have to do with you not renewing the contract? Mr. Wallace chuckled. Because I only signed with you in the first place out of respect for Professor Quinn. I'm his biggest fan. Laura stared blankly at me. Dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, I walked elegantly to the main table. At least half the people at the table stood up to shake my hand. People around were whispering. I heard Professor Quinn is planning a comeback. It's no wonder. So many industry leaders are his fans. With a network like that, it was a waste for him to be retired. Laura suddenly remembered that she never really knew the extent of my status in the music world. She had once jokingly asked if I had a lot of fans. At the time, I had laughed and said, not many fans, but they're all heavy hitters. Laura smiled through gritted teeth. The people at the main table were all major figures in the industry. Laura had worked with many of them before. She had thought it was her own competence that had earned their recognition. But looking back now, she realized they had all come because of me. Laura wanted to slap herself. In the 3 months since her divorce from me, her company had lost several major contracts. It was now struggling to stay afloat. To make matters worse, her professional life wasn't the only thing in shambles, her love life was a disaster too. After the wedding, Richard became a different person, a total control freak. Every time she spent money, he would interrogate her about it, telling her what she should or shouldn't have bought. Yet he spent money like water himself. He'd buy 5 or 6 limited edition luxury watches at once, spending over $1 million on the associated fees alone. He went to a golf club that cost thousands of dollars per visit every other day. Not only that, but he started trying to network on her behalf just like I used to. But those wealthy tycoons looked down on him, subtly and not so subtly putting him in his place. The more they did, the more Richard tried to suck up to them. He maxed out her credit cards, buying them expensive cigars and antiques, calling it a gesture of goodwill. Once you show enough sincerity, things will get done, he'd say. But they would take his gifts and then mock him for his tacky efforts behind his back. Laura was humiliated by association. Laura stared daggers at me and my son. Several times, Laura had tried to meet with him, but he always said he was busy. Now he was standing beside me, graciously greeting everyone. Then she looked at Zach, hiding behind her, who could only manage a sycophantic smile at everyone he saw. Suddenly, Laura was filled with regret. After the banquet, she made a point of sending Richard away so she could have a word with me. But she couldn't even get close. She was jostled around in a crowd of fans and reporters, pushed from side to side. My gaze swept over her, a derisive smile playing on my lips. Laura thought she must be going crazy. When I began a global tour, she bought a ticket to every single show. She followed me all over the world. I knew about it, but I didn't stop her. Laura secretly rejoiced, thinking I still had a soft spot for her. But after one concert, she went backstage with a bouquet of flowers, hoping to surprise me. Instead, she overheard me telling my assistant, "Don't worry about her. She'll stop when she runs out of money." Laura was incandescent with rage. When Richard found out, he threw a massive tantrum, even threatening self-harm to get her to come home. Laura had no choice but to book a flight back overnight. It wasn't that she was afraid of Richard dying. It was that the villa they were living in was their only remaining property. If they needed cash flow later, they would have to sell the house. A house where someone had died would lose at least a third of its value. She felt a bitter resentment, wondering how she had managed to play such a good hand so badly. Late at night, listening to Richard's heavy breathing, she grew more and more agitated. Too many setbacks had worn away any trace of class Richard once had. Even though he was once a genuine rich kid, he wasn't fit to hold a candle to me now. At first, she took care of Richard out of guilt. But over time, she began to unconsciously compare him to me. Richard was passionate, I was reserved. Richard was proactive, I was calm. Even in bed, I was always silent and focused, nothing like Richard's variety of tricks. But now, seeing me, still shining so brightly after the divorce, she began to find Richard embarrassing. After the tour, I remained busy running my company, raising my son. But I also found time to become an honorary professor at the conservatory. Laura couldn't get into my company, but she could sneak into the conservatory and audit my classes. My voice was smooth and persuasive. Your choice of piece isn't about being as difficult as possible. If your execution is poor, it will also affect the judges' scores. She watched me, mesmerized. I seemed to be doing very well, even the corners of my eyes crinkled with a smile. She didn't know if we could ever get back together, but she wanted to try. So she started contacting our son frequently. Laura made a big show of buying a Steinway and having it delivered to our son's school. She thought he would be moved to tears, but he just looked at her with disappointment. "You don't even know if I play a grand piano or an upright." Laura finally learned that the piano I had bought for our son was far more expensive than a Steinway. She had been blind. She had thrown away a treasure. Laura asked Richard for a divorce, but Richard was not as dignified as I was. He clung to her like a madman. Later, when he saw that her mind was made up, Richard gave her a strange smile. "If you won't let me be happy, then you won't be happy either." He reported Laura to the police. He claimed that his late wife's car accident years ago was a hit and run that Laura had arranged. The police issued a bulletin for her cooperation, and she went into hiding. Only Laura knew the truth. Sheila had secured that contract. She had demanded a 50-50 split with Laura. But at the time, Laura's career was just starting, and she was desperate for money. So she came up with a brilliant idea. If Sheila had an accident, she naturally wouldn't be able to worry about the contract. But she never expected the driver to make a mistake and actually kill Sheila. With no way out, Laura decided to turn herself in. But first, she went to my solo concert. On stage, I was impossibly handsome. It was reminiscences of Norma again. My performance was even better than it had been all those years ago. But Laura never expected Richard to suddenly rush the stage, a knife in his hand. He screamed at me, "Go to hell." I didn't even raise an eyelid, continuing to play with perfect composure. Without thinking, Laura lunged forward to shield me from the danger. But several bodyguards suddenly appeared, expertly intercepting Richard and dragging him away. On stage, only I remained, completely unfazed. And a bewildered Laura. Laura felt eyes on her from all directions. She suddenly felt like a clown. Laura and Richard were both taken away by the police. She heard about the rest later. Richard spread rumors that I was the other man and claimed my son was psychologically disturbed and had scratched his $1 million piano. But 10 minutes later, I released the evidence. It was security footage from the villa. Even Laura hadn't known there were cameras in that house. The footage clearly showed Richard scratching the piano himself and then framing someone else. At the same time, Zach, Richard's son, bravely came forward. I was too scared to tell the truth back then. I was afraid my dad would hit me. Mr. Quinn is actually a really nice person. The public outcry reversed before it even had a chance to build. I was completely unaffected. Richard and Laura, for conspiracy to commit assault and murder, were sentenced to 5 and 12 years in prison, respectively. Zach was sent to a group home. At the entrance of the home, Zach waited for a long time, as if hoping someone would come to adopt him. But the person he was hoping for never appeared. 12 years later, Laura was released from prison. She had nowhere to go. After Richard got out, he crossed some people on the street, got one of his legs broken, and then disappeared. Our son went abroad to study and had since become famous. And me, somehow, she found herself back at the conservatory. She guessed I would still be there. Through a crack in the door, she saw me, almost unchanged. Time seemed to have left no trace on my face, only making me more serene and elegant. The next moment, she froze. Sitting across from me was a grown-up Zach. I was guiding him through an extremely difficult piece of music. After the lesson, Zach spoke nervously. "Uncle Daniel," my expression was unreadable. "This Professor Quinn." The two titles drew a clear line. Zach stammered his thanks for my guidance and repeatedly apologized for what happened years ago. "I was busy wiping down the piano. You became my student on your own merit. You don't need to thank anyone. What happened back then wasn't your fault, but you can't force me to forgive you. Understand?" Zach was silent for a long time, then bowed deeply to me. Laura paused, then turned and walked away. She had wanted to beg me one last time to try and mend things. But now she already knew the answer. Wrong was wrong. Lost was lost. Her Daniel drew a firm line between gratitude and grudges, and he never looked back.